On today's Big Phone In, has the picture of the drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis? The front pages are dominated today by the shocking picture of a small Syrian child washed up on the Turkish beach, having drowned after his family tried to get him to Greece. Headlines such as "Plight of Migrant Children Stirs Europe's Conscience" and "Europe Could Not Save Him" all hammer home the message that European governments are not doing enough to help people trying to come here for a better life. David Cameron is now facing increasing pressure to ensure thousands of migrants can get safely to the UK. And Labour politician Yvette Cooper has called this crisis the greatest humanitarian crisis to reach our continent since the Second World War. Well, this morning I want to hear your reaction to this. Has the picture of the drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis? It's the Big Phone In. This morning I'm asking, has the picture of the drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis? The front pages are dominated today by the shocking picture of a small Syrian child washed up on the Turkish beach, having drowned after his family tried to get him to Greece. Headlines such as "Plight of Migrant Children Stirs Europe's Conscience" and "Europe Could Not Save Him" all hammer home the message that European governments are not doing enough to help people trying to come here for a better life. David Cameron is now facing increasing pressure to ensure thousands of migrants can get safely to the UK. And Labour politician Yvette Cooper has called this crisis the greatest humanitarian crisis to reach our continent since the Second World War. Sanj Srikarthan is from the International Rescue Committee. He's told the BBC the picture of this little 3-year-old Syrian boy could convince a lot of people it's time we found homes for people fleeing trouble abroad.
I hope it's a game changer, not just for the UK, but for a lot of European countries. If you look at the countries in the Middle East, like Turkey hosting 1.8 million refugees, we're not really pulling our weight in this crisis. And as you can see, it is incredibly tragic what is happening on a daily basis.
Conservative MP Johnny Mercer says he'll back the UK doing more to help.
Vulnerable and very fragile people are fleeing an almost inconceivable evil. I think that we should be doing our fair share. I think that there is more that can be done and we should be doing more, and that's certainly the opinion of the vast majority of people I've spoken to.
Well, elsewhere in Europe's governments are already giving up trying to stop the surge of people from Syria, Africa and the Middle East. Nick Thorpe is in Hungary, where barricades have been removed and immigrants are now being allowed onto trains to Germany.
The police stood aside. They are now allowing thousands of migrants to go through the doors. They've stood aside. There's no sign of the police there now. People are running across the square and climbing up the steps into the railway station, from which they've been banned access since early on Tuesday morning.
So MPs here and European governments seem to be changing their view on the migrant crisis. But what about you? Has the picture of this drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis? It's no secret that we've been compelled to discuss the migrant crisis on a number of occasions in the last month or so here on the JVS show. I mean, how can we ignore it? It's dominated the news agenda and the front pages for some time now, and it's fair to say it probably will do for some time to come. What I've found so interesting is quite how angry the situation seems to make many of you. Like listeners. For example, Alec in High Wycombe. He rang me yesterday to say he doesn't believe the UK should simply open its gates to migrants from abroad, as we already struggle to cope with the number of people living in this country.
You know, it's absolute rubbish. We cannot cope. Do you know, I will put something to you. Do you know, all those people that fought in the First and Second World War, if they had a crystal ball, would they not have bothered? That's how I feel. And you know, Jonathan, I'm sorry if I'm angry, but I'm going to be honest here. I don't care about ISIS. The people that come into this country that make it across on the channel, on the train, should be put on the next train back. I don't care. I mean, it makes me angry, so angry, because we're all suffering. We're all suffering. You do,
Alec.
Families,
you do care.
In 10 years, that will double.
You do care.
I mean, they get, money for having children. You know, they get a family allowance. You
Alec,
know, it's like sort of.
Alec, you do care. Alec, you do care. If there were a family, no, you do.
I'm sorry, I really don't.
No,
care.
you do.
Enough.
You do.
You know, this country is suffering, and I said last week that it's becoming uncomfortable in this country, and it is.
You do care in that if you saw a family, if you saw a mum and a dad and two little children on a boat, and the boat was sinking, and those people had desperately fled their country where everything they knew, they have fled that country because they want to try and save their children's lives, you'd care about that.
Listen, nobody wants to see that. It's a bad thing. I'm not saying that, but they shouldn't be on that boat. I don't believe a lot of them are fleeing.
But they're unlucky but they're just human beings like you and me. They're just unlucky that they weren't born in High Wycombe.
But, if there's 10 extra houses in 10 extra boroughs, then give them to people that have been waiting 8 years, because that happens. It makes me sick that people are written off because other people come into this country, and when you just can't send them to a school because they don't speak English. It is the taxpayer is paying for this in a way, we can't afford it.
Well, that was yesterday, and unfortunately the example that I was giving, Alec, is now all over the front pages of the papers today, but I wonder whether it's changed his mind. He's back on the show. Hello, Alec.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning. So I don't know if you've seen the pictures that we're talking about this morning. They're difficult to escape. They're absolutely everywhere, of this poor little tiny boy who has been washed up on a beach, having drowned, presumably as part of a desperate attempt by his parents to reach safety. Has that changed your mind on how we deal with the migrant crisis?
Well, first of all, sorry for being so angry yesterday. Your first call wound me up. But anyway, it's horrific to see, and it's upsetting. But the arm of responsibility falls on them, to put that child on the boat. You can't blame England for everybody else's problems. I'm sorry to say that,
But surely any parent that is prepared to put their children at that kind of risk is a parent who is desperate. It's a parent who feels, having weighed up the risk, that actually the risk of staying in their country is greater than the risk they face getting on a boat. Surely that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not sure that's true in every case. I think a lot of them just want to be in Europe. That may sound hard and cold, but that's the way I feel about it. It is horrific, and it's upsetting. And Yvette Cooper is wrong. She said, the biggest tragedy since the Second World War. I can tell you that the Vietnam War threw up some horrible images. Horrible.
The Prime Minister is being put under more and more pressure to take in a large number of these refugees, migrants, whatever word you want to use. We all know who we're talking about. Do you think that now is the time, particularly based on these photographs, for him to at least relent a little?
No, I don't. I think there are other countries out there that could do their bit.
But many of them are. Germany is absolutely
America,
furious with
Australia?
us.
What about the big countries that could quite easily bring these people into their country and help them in the way that we can? But Jonathan, as I said yesterday, we are a small island, and
we're a small island that has historically been kind to people around the world and helpful to people around the world. We have in many ways led the world when it comes to showing a caring hand. Should we really sit back and wait for the likes of Australia or the United States of America to do something before we do something?
I'm afraid we should. As horrific as it is, and I'm not saying it is upsetting, the only thing that matter in this world is not money or anything else. It's people. It's our friends,
But surely you've just answered your own question.
I know that.
If every single country around the world, every single safe country, was to say, you know what, we recognise this is truly awful, we are all going to share the number of refugees that need to leave the likes of Syria, then surely we could, as a world, we could absorb those people into our societies, give them somewhere safe to live, and we could do it in an organised way that isn't going to risk lives.
No, I'm sorry. I stick by my principles. We've done our bit. We've done more than our bit. We give 12 billion in foreign aid, We cannot take it anymore. One day, there's going to be a backlash in this country because of all this. People would have had enough. You know, they see all this.
There might be a backlash if we don't do anything.
To who? I mean, Germany is a massive, massive country. They've got a lot more space than us. We're a small country, and we're full up. And we don't want to, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but we can't keep taking people and make it uncomfortable for the people that live here. And it will, believe me, because the people that coming in 10 years will double and double and double. It just can't carry on. We can't cope the way we are. Our schools, our hospitals, our doctors, the infrastructure is not there. If it could cope, I would say, OK, bring some in. But it can't, Jonathan.
Alec, I want to put to you an interesting point that was raised by the actress Emma Thompson, who's been speaking to the BBC about this crisis, and she was asked why she thinks there is so much resistance in the UK, such as the resistance we're hearing from you, Alec, to finding homes for migrants from around the world. Just listen to what she said.
I think it's got a lot to do with racism. I think if these people were white Europeans that were coming from some dictatorship in Bosnia or were somewhere where, if they were turning up, I think we would feel quite differently about it. There's 3,000 of them in Calais. That's nothing. We've got plenty of room for them.
What do you make of that?
Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. I mean, it depends how you put... I'm not a racist, you know. I'm not a racist, but I wouldn't say the same. If it was white people, it would be the same. It's not the people that are coming in. It's the system that supports them. I want you to understand that. I know when I spoke yesterday, I went down the town to get a few bits and pieces and walked into a charity shop that someone knew me. She took a very dim view of what I said on the radio. She was horrible to me. But I don't want to give the wrong impression. It's the infrastructure that supports them. We cannot cope. And the sooner people realise that, the better.
Thank you so much, Alec, for coming back on the show. I was interested to see if Alec would have changed his mind based on this picture. It would appear he hasn't. But have you? The commentators, the newspapers today are talking about this picture, or this series of pictures, being a landmark moment. The moment where the British public looks at that photo and suddenly this becomes very real. Somehow people realise that this is affecting children that could be your children. And this needs to be stopped. Some way needs to be found of sorting this problem. And the Prime Minister is being put under increasing pressure, particularly from the Germans, who are saying, you are not doing enough. We are taking 800,000 of these people into Germany to help them. How many has Britain taken? About 200 odd. Do you think we should now do something to help? Do you think we should now accept that we cannot just keep saying the same line of, it's not our problem, we don't want any more people coming into the country? Has the time changed? Kevin in Milton Keynes texts me to say, Jonathan, David Cameron is running this country, so if he says we can't or we won't take any immigrants, then that should be it. The papers putting a picture of a drowned child on its front pages are just a last-ditch attempt at making us feel guilty. We have nothing to feel guilty about, and Cameron needs to stick to his guns. Guilt trips shouldn't be used on us just because other countries are now having more problems than they expected. We need to look after our own people. Dave says, Jonathan, they pass through 8 other countries before they get here. The only reason is other countries worldwide won't give them benefits and a free house. Orlando Crowcroft is Executive Director of Geopolitics. Good morning to you, Orlando.
Morning.
Good morning. So, has this picture of the drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis?
To be honest, I don't think my mind needed changing. I've always felt that the UK hasn't done enough for migrants generally. So, I mean, I think the interesting thing is whether it will, what you mentioned earlier about whether it will change people's minds more generally. And I do think that that's changing. I think there is a momentum epitomised actually by Emma Thompson's words and others saying these statements in the press. I think it is changing, and the picture will only make that faster, speed that up.
The thing is, though, and this was something we touched on yesterday, isn't it easy for people like Yvette Cooper, like Emma Thompson, to make almost the country feel guilty for not wanting more people to come here? Because the chances are these refugees are not going to end up living next door to Emma Thompson in her probably very spacious house in London, or the likes of Yvette Cooper. They're going to end up in towns and villages in the rest of the country, and it is those people who are concerned that they will then have extra pressure on their doctors' surgeries, on their roads, on their schools, on their local hospitals. It's those people that have valid concerns about whether we can, as a country, handle more people.
Well, first of all, I would totally object to you defining these people living next door to us. I mean, London is a city, for instance, which has thrived on immigration for generations, and we don't talk about these people moving in next door to us. I don't know much about High Wycombe, to be honest, but that would be my first point. My second would be that. Sorry, I remember your question.
Well, no, I just wondered why you feel that it's not valid for people to be concerned about whether their local towns can cope with the sheer numbers of people.
Yeah, of course, and I think that a lot of that is a political problem. I don't think we're seeing the numbers. I don't think we're seeing the common view is that England is full up. And so on, there's stress on this and that, and I don't know if there's ever actually been any studies done to lay out what kind of impact this would have, absorbing a fair number of people into this country.
But the thing is, every time I do a programme on, for example, doctor surgeries, on school places, on the roads, on social housing, my phone lines absolutely light up with people saying that all of those things are under so much pressure at the moment that people are having a hard time in this country. People who live in this country already are having a hard time. They're having a hard time because it takes them forever to get a doctor's appointment. It takes them virtually an impossible amount of time to find some kind of social housing that's available to them. So if those are the kinds of things we're hearing already with the number of people that are in this country at the moment, is it not perfectly valid to express concerns about whether we could, for example, handle thousands more people from around the world?
It is fair, yeah, but I mean, to be honest, the kind of numbers we're talking about, and people keep talking about how small the UK is for absorbing these people. I don't really accept that. I mean, I honestly do not think that it would have a massive impact. You know, the issue of cuts is a political issue, and it's a problem, of course.
Where do you propose these people live, then?
Well, that's not my job, is it?
Well, no, but surely if you are going to argue that we should be welcoming people in, then you must have some idea as to where they're going to live. I mean, do you live in London?
I do.
Okay, so you live in London, which is a highly built-up area. I would imagine there's absolutely no room whatsoever in London for any of these refugees to live. There's no available housing. Would I be right in saying that?
I absolutely don't know. I don't know how much available social housing there is in London. Do you? I mean...
I have no idea, but I would imagine when you're talking about millions and millions and millions of people living in our capital city, and there are not very many open spaces in London, the chances of being able to build much more social housing is probably fairly limited in London. So it's then going to fall to other places, such as here in Bedfordshire, Hertfordshire and Buckinghamshire, where we still have open spaces, where we still have small towns rather than big cities. It's going to fall to us to then build more housing. Who's going to pay for this?
With respect, I think that's a bit of a red herring, because neither of us know the numbers, and you don't know that it's going to fall to your counties to absorb people. I mean, and I don't know either. So, I mean, we can argue about this all day, hypothetically. But, I mean, I think the point has been made, and it's been made very forcefully. This is a moral issue. We're part of Europe. Europe's doing its bit, as should we.
OK, thank you, Orlando. Orlando Crowcroft, who's the executive editor of geopolitics at the International Business Times. Stephen Wolfe is UKIP's migration spokesman. He's also the MEP for North West England. Hello to you, Stephen.
Good morning.
Good morning. So has the picture of this drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis?
The picture is horrifying. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I have to admit I've been completely upset by it. But my issue is that I haven't changed on what needs to be done in order to help solve this particular problem that's occurring. We've made it very clear in UKIP that the causes of the migrant crisis has come down to international intervention in Syria and Libya, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. It's the way that we prop up regimes in Africa which do immense damage to their people, and the way that we trade, particularly in the EU, have unfair trading agreements with African countries which impoverish them. And we've called for quite some time for an international conference held by the UN that looks at all of these issues and how you distribute those people who are suffering as a consequence of this across the globe. Take, for example, there is no one been sent to Dubai or Saudi Arabia or any of those wealthy countries that are very close to Syria, and they're not accepting any.
But why should we use countries that are turning their back, and many would argue being heartless towards this situation? Why should we hold them up and put them on a pedestal and say, well, they're not doing it, so why should we? Haven't we always been better than that?
Yes, we have, and we still are. This year we had around 25,000 asylum applications, and we had 30,000 the year before, and I suspect that we'll have slightly more than that this year because we're not including. We had 2,272, I think, Syrian applications, of which 87% were accepted last year. We're putting 300 million euros into the fund in the European Union, which is helping out those in Italy and Greece when they finally distribute the money out there. So as a country, we are doing our bit, and of course we contribute an enormous amount to the charities. The problem, as you raised early on, is it's not just about the asylum applications that are coming here and genuine refugees. It's the fact that last year we had 330,000 people come to this country to live, cities the size of York and Oxford added together. And that's compounding the pressure. And I believe that people in this country, if we didn't have open door migration, if we controlled our own borders, instead of being borderless Britain, we actually managed that, people would be more accepting of people from other countries on the asylum issue. But
the vast majority of people that come to this country, they're not people who want to get job seekers allowance, whatever small amount that is per week. They don't flock from other parts of the world in order to take 60 odd quid a week. They come here for job opportunities. So if those people are working, if those people are getting employment, if they're paying tax, why are we as a country not demanding more investment in our resources, like hospitals, like doctors' surgeries, like the roads, like schools? Why are we not demanding that extra money, that extra revenue that is being earned by the country because of the migration is put into providing better resources? Why do we keep saying, well, we just have to keep spending exactly the same amount on the infrastructure and we need to send all these people home?
Well, because it doesn't actually necessarily work with that, unfortunately. Even the studies that are coming out, including those from Mark Carney, from the Bank of England, has said that because we've had large-scale migration in the numbers that we've had, over 5 million in nearly 11 years, that the impact of that is that you've pushed wages down. That's indisputable now for those on the lower earning levels. It's also made job displacement of people who are born in this country much more easy. And when you talk about the economic growth, it's only in small amounts of GDP of those who are actually come from certain parts of the world, if you like the United States, if you look at those who come from Germany, for example. But the CREAM report used by the UCL, which has come out early on this year, actually said the cost to this country over that 11-year period of migration was between 98 and 154 billion pounds. There isn't the positive aspect that people talk about, and we only talk about GDP, we don't talk about all the other costs as well.
When you look at that photo, and as many people in the country are waking up this morning and are buying their newspapers and turning on the television and seeing that photo, do you think this is a landmark moment? Do you think it will change people's minds? OK, it hasn't changed your mind on what we should do, but do you think it will have an effect on the rest of the country?
I think that people will be like myself, who will be horrified and demand that action needs to be done. And I'm not saying that I haven't demanded that we do action here. I have said that we will take people in. We will have 30,000 next year, and I think there should be genuine asylum seekers, not the economic migrants that we're finding many of them are when they're actually going through the asylum process. So we'll still take a large number. But unless we do a decisive action as a world together. Do you remember when we were growing up, I don't know if you do, we had Feed the World, and everyone came together to try and help. Why can't we do that now? Why are we saying that eventually it's just a European issue, and out of that European issue it'll end up just being a few countries in there, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, the United Kingdom, possibly a little bit of Netherlands as well, who will take the bulk of that just because we're a little bit wealthier than the rest. But we have the highest density.
But you just lumped us in with those other countries that seem to be helping far more than we did. I mean, if Germany are talking about us taking in, Germany are talking about them taking in at 800,000, how many have we taken in so far? About 260.
Well, they're saying 260. As I say, last year's numbers showed that we had over 2,200 in terms of...
Even so, compared to 800,000.
Yeah, it's not comparable to that in Germany. That I accept, and then Germany has made it very clear it's only accepting those in terms of the Syrians. It's not talking about the Bangladeshis, the Darfurs, the Sudanese, those who are coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo. For example, the UN has talked about 59 million people in this region area, with 15 war conflicts going on. And there's already 1 million on the borders between Libya all the way up to Turkey. We have to accept that if we take this route, it's not going to be just small numbers. We're going to have to plan to take much larger numbers, and I don't think the country's infrastructure, etc., as you mentioned early on, are capable of doing that without a more strategic plan.
Stephen, thank you very much indeed. Stephen Wolfe, who is UKIP's migration spokesman and also MEP for North West England. I don't think I really need to give much explanation for our phone in this morning. Let me just ask you the question, because I want you to answer it. Has the picture of the drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis? It's on all the front pages of the papers today. It's, of course, my big phone in. I'm asking, has the picture of the drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis? The front pages are dominated today by the shocking picture of a small Syrian child washed up on a Turkish beach, having drowned after his family tried to get him to Greece. Headlines such as "Plight of Migrant Children Stirs Europe's Conscience" and "Europe Could Not Save Him" all hammer home the message that European governments are not doing enough to help people trying to come here for a better life. David Cameron is now facing increasing pressure to ensure thousands of migrants can get safely to the UK. And Labour politician Yvette Cooper has called this crisis the greatest humanitarian crisis to reach our continent since the Second World War. Well, I'm asking you today, has the picture of the drowned little boy changed your mind on the migrant crisis? Let me do some more of your texts. Bert texts to say, Emma Thompson is in cloud cuckoo land. I'm with Alec. This picture, the picture of the little boy, should be airdropped over Syria to discourage them. Presumably Bert means discourage them from ever leaving. I'm not quite sure. Andrew Mitchell is the former Conservative International Development Secretary. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Good morning.
Morning. Has this picture of the drowned little boy changed your mind on how we tackle the migrant crisis?
No, because it's brought home the horror and ghastliness of this crisis in a way that many of us have understood for some time. It was 4 years ago that, as Development Secretary, I committed a lot of British taxpayers' money to set up camps on the border with Syria to look after those who were fleeing across the border, often under gunfire, and provide healthcare, medicines, food and shelter for them. And the answer to this crisis is to stop the fighting in Syria. It is to ensure that the international community does far more to bring about the end of that fighting. And that will then address the symptoms which we are addressing and which are so harrowing on the European shore.
Isn't that the million-dollar question, though? How on earth do we do that?
Well, we do it in a number of ways. I mean, we do it in the very long term by pursuing the policies of international development where Britain has led the world. But that is for the long term. In the short term, everyone with influence over those who are fighting in Syria needs to bring that influence to bear to get them to the negotiating table so that a political solution can be agreed. That will be the way this ends, not through military action. And that day will come, and we need to do everything we can to ensure that that day comes as swiftly as possible. In the meanwhile, Britain and Germany are in the lead in Europe in terms of looking after those caught up in this crisis. Germany by taking in large numbers of refugees into Germany, and Britain by supporting hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees who have fled across the border, whose first instinct is not to want to go and start a new life on a new continent, but want to go back to their homes and communities when the fighting finishes. And Britain is supporting hundreds of thousands of them, as I say, in camps around the border of Syria, awaiting the day when that will be possible and they will be able to return to their homes.
Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Andrew Mitchell is the former Conservative International Development Secretary. He raises an interesting point, and let me put this question out there. He says that what we should be doing as a country to try and help here is to try and end the fighting in Syria. Here's a question I'm going to put out there, and I'm not saying that this is how I feel, but I just want to see what your reaction is to this. Is it time to do a deal with the devil in Syria? When President Assad had full control of his country, there's no doubt about it, he has been a very cruel and a very evil man. But when he was in charge of the country was not in the state that it's in now. Is there an argument to say that what we should be doing is helping President Assad now regain his control over the country in order to stop the fighting, in order to help the Syrian people rebuild their country, which will then mean they won't want to leave and come here? Is there any credibility in that question and doing that? Pat texts to say, "Hi JVS, we've taken in migrants from all over the world and we've experienced how migrants repay our kindness by wanting this country to bow down to their ways. This puts me off having to take any more. This is what happens when soldiers are not sent into a country to help. Lib Dems and wimpy Labour MPs who are against our past interventions are now seeing the downside to doing absolutely nothing. Europe gets invaded. We need an EU referendum now. Enough is enough, and this has nothing to do with racism. Emma Thompson, it's a disgrace when a rich person like you misuses the race card." Matt in Hanslope texts to say, "JVS, if I was desperate enough to put my young family into a small inflatable boat without a life jacket to cross a large sea when I wouldn't do it on a small boating lake, then I'd be more than happy to live in any safe country. Hungary would be fine for me. Thank you." John is in Datchworth. Hello to you, John.
Good morning.
Morning. What do you make of the picture of this drowned little boy then? Has it changed your mind on the migrant crisis?
No, it's a guilt thing. They published that just to try and make people feel bad. I personally think that at this present moment in time, we need to keep our borders closed, don't let anybody else in whatsoever. We need to sort the country out. Now, we are taking in people, or people are coming here willy-nilly with murder convictions and stuff. I was watching a telly programme last night where a bloke was trying to kick his neighbour's door in. He was threatening to murder him, and it turned out that he'd already had a conviction for murder in Lithuania. He'd served 6 years over there, come over here. He was wielding knives at this fella. And all that. So we need to be fussy who we let in. We don't want anybody that isn't any use to us. We don't want people here that are going to be a drain on our resources. I'm working at the moment, but a couple of years ago I was made redundant, and basically the help I got from the government wasn't worth flushing down the toilet. And I paid in for 30 odd years.
You say that we should pick and choose who we want in this country. You use the example of a European criminal moving to this country and then causing problems here. But if you were looking at a Syrian family, a mum and a dad and two little children like these two little boys from the same family that drowned in that boat and were washed up on the beach, are you honestly saying that you don't wish that we'd been able to take that family in so they didn't die?
It's a very poor situation. Obviously, I've got children, and you wouldn't want to wish that on anybody, whether they're foreign, English, or or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not just us. Why are the Americans not helping out? They are the ones that went in with us to a lot of these places and started at A, finished at B, and basically upset everybody. But they're saying that America's too far away for these people to get to, which is fine. Let them come to these European countries, put them all on a plane, and send them to America. send them to places that are contributing to the hassle in the first place. We need to be a little bit more like Australia. You know, if you're no good to us, we don't want you. If you're going to be draining our resources, we don't want you. And we certainly don't want anything that is going to be a major issue later on in life. We do not want to import any more criminals. We don't want any more criminals coming in. We've got enough.
You keep talking about criminals. Surely we're talking about human beings. We're talking about people who are desperate.
We are, but fine.
But you keep bringing up criminals to justify your argument. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about children. They're not criminals.
Okay, well, I'll come away from the criminal one then. Old people, old age pension stuff. I was reading through one of the papers in the Barbers the other evening. I'm not sure it was the Sun News. There's only two papers I picked up, the Sun newspaper or the Hertfordshire Mercury. And in one of those newspapers, it was the fact that an old people's home had closed down because there was no money to run it. And all the old people either had to find somewhere else to go or sort of try and wedge in with a family.
They were moved in the middle of the night.
Right?
Yeah.
Weeks later, the taxpayers are paying for that home to be reopened for immigrants. Now, I'm a taxpayer. My taxpayers' money should be used for that home to be kept open for the people that have paid into this country, all the old people that have possibly even been in the war or whatever. They have paid in during most of their working lives, and they are basically tossed out on the street while that place is filled full of immigrants at my expense. I'm not happy. Why should everybody be pushed around, make space for other people to come into this country? It's wrong.
Okay, thank you, John. Do you agree with John? Or are you listening to him thinking that man and his attitude are an absolute disgrace? That is not what it is to be a British man. That's not what it is to have a British attitude. David Burrows is the Conservative MP for Enfield Southgate. He's also the Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Refugees. David, good morning to you.
Good morning.
This is a nightmare for you politicians to try and deal with, isn't it? I mean, do you feel as if now is the time that we should allow some of these people to come to the country, to our country, for safe refuge?
Well, you say nightmare. I mean, it's the nightmare is there's people who are fleeing conflict and persecution and taking the desperate path to put their lives.
Of course, but you're the people that have to make the decisions now, and the public is now looking on you, the politicians, to see what you're going to do to sort this problem out. So it's a political nightmare for you as well. We recognise.
I mean, it's complex, and there's no one simple solution, and none of us should say because we've accepted this many refugees or put this amount of aid in that we've done enough. We should be looking to do as much as possible, and certainly, as I've heard already on your show, people talking about the historic duty we have. We've also got a current duty. I mean, we accept I think 1% of Syrian refugees, but we've got 1% more than 1% responsibility in relation to Syria. We've very much taken the lead on humanitarian aid, and we've been involved in the wider military response. But in terms of voluntary resettling refugees, we're accepting several hundred when other countries are accepting in the thousands. And my view is that we should do more at the very least. It's not the solution in its own way, but at the very least accept more voluntarily. And it's a very different issue about those who eventually get their way through southern Europe and into this country and put forward an asylum application. That's a very different issue.
How are you going to persuade your leader, though? Because David Cameron doesn't agree. He's been very firm that the UK will not be welcoming any more people than it has already welcomed into this country.
Well, I mean, in June he increased the numbers that we voluntarily resettle. At the time, as I said, I actually said I think it's too little, too late, and I'm still of that view. We shouldn't just be responding as to the awful pictures that we saw on the news. We should be responding to it, though. We shouldn't ignore it, but it shouldn't just be a reaction. We should have a wider strategy, which he is calling for, to deal with the problem, and recognising that Britain is doing a lot. We're out there very much spending pretty much the most all of Europe put together in terms of humanitarian aid, but we can also do more in relation to voluntary settlement of Syrian refugees to try and play our part. And I think it strengthens our hand internationally when looking at what we can all do. If we are saying, look, we're doing the most pretty much on humanitarian aid, and we should be doing pretty much the most on with voluntary settlement. So I think we should step up the numbers of voluntary settlement of Syrian refugees to make it the thousands rather than the hundreds.
The problem you've got, and people who argue what you're arguing have got, is that many, many people in this country, you've just heard John in Datchworth, have completely opposing views to you. There are many people in this country, and I've been talking about this migrant crisis now many times over the last few weeks, as indeed many broadcasters have. And I think every time we are absolutely overwhelmed with people saying, no, we don't want any more people, close the borders, it's not our problem, and even stronger comments than that.
And I think that's why, with a Conservative government wanting to take a proper, robust line in terms of controlling our borders, and that's an issue of negotiation with Europe and the rest of it, having a robust line in relation to controlling our borders, but at the same time we can show a compassionate side, which is, the two go hand in hand in many ways. Control means, yes, in terms of numbers coming in, but also in terms of welcoming numbers in relation to particularly who are seeking refuge. And that's the important distinction. And that's why I think we are in a strong position to take a lead with proper control, but that also includes showing that we, as we've always done as a country, have welcomed those seeking refuge, particularly in areas such as Syria, where we've been involved for a number of years now already. We must accept the consequences when we get involved in these countries.
Thank you, David. David Burrows is the Conservative MP for Enfield Southgate. He's also the Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Refugees. Well, has this picture of the little boy who drowned in the sea, has that picture changed your mind on the migrant crisis? It's no secret that we have discussed the migrant crisis for weeks now on this programme. So many times it has been the top of the news agenda. It's been the thing that people are talking about. And of course, we have reflected that on the programme. Many people are now saying today is a bit of a landmark moment, because all over the front pages of the papers is this shocking picture of a very small 3-year-old Syrian boy with all of his clothes on. I think what makes it so heartbreaking is his little clothes are on, his little shoes are on his feet, and he's drowned in the sea. And he's been washed up on a Turkish beach. And the photos of the police officer or the army officer, I'm not quite sure, picking this little boy up in his arms and carrying him. It's all over the front pages. It's absolutely heartbreaking to see this picture. Headlines such as "Plight of Migrant Children Stirs Europe's Conscience" and "Europe Could Not Save Him" all hammer home the message that European governments are not doing enough to help people trying to come here for a better life. David Cameron is now facing increasing pressure to ensure thousands of migrants can get safely to the UK. Well, I've been asking you today, this picture, has it now changed your mind on the migrant crisis? I know when we've spoken about this in the past, so many of you have said, no, don't let any more people come here. We're full. Close the borders. Our hospitals can't take any more people. Our schools can't take any more people. Our doctor surgeries can't take any more people. We haven't got any housing for these people. Close the borders. Do not let them come here. Does this picture now change your mind? Mark is in Bedford. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hello, Mark. How do you feel about this?
Well, I think it is a terrible picture, but it doesn't change my mind, I'm afraid. And the point I just made to your researcher is that, there's lots of people, the media and people saying, why isn't Europe doing more? Why are we not letting more people in? The question should be, why are the Arab states not doing more? Why are you not talking to people like the Arab League and the Council of the Gulf states? Why is Saudi Arabia? Why is Iran? Why is the Emirates not doing more? Sheikh Mansour owns Man City. He spent over £1 billion on that football club. Why are those people not doing more? Why is it down to Europe? That's what makes me angry. Those people have got land borders with Jordan, with Lebanon, with Turkey. And it's Europe that should be feeling ashamed. It's those people that should be feeling ashamed. It actually makes me quite emotional that those people are not doing more to sort out the people in their own region.
But unfortunately, there have always been countries around the world that are able to, with a seemingly clear conscience, close their eyes to the problems, close their borders and say, not our issue, not our fault. We're going to deal with things ourselves in our own country. We're not going to welcome in any of these people. And And that's for them to then live with. That's with their attitude. But there are lots of people in this country who would argue we've always been different and sometimes it ends up biting us on the backside, but we've always been different in terms of if we have seen people around the world in desperate need of help, as a country, we have normally been prepared to do whatever is necessary to try and help those people out. Now it would appear the rhetoric is very different. Now the rhetoric is, no, we don't want to do anything, we don't want to help.
Well, much as the same as your previous caller, I mean, you just need to have listened to Ian Lee's show this week. You had someone on the show yesterday, Milton Keynes Council couldn't find him a home. He was living in a bin shed. You had a couple a few weeks ago that were living in a trouble lodge because Luton Council couldn't find him anywhere to live. You have Luton Council taking other councils to court because they can't build any social housing and they're landlocked. They can't find anywhere to live. And you've got, like I said, you've got these countries in the Middle East that are not poor. They're certainly in a better situation than the Greek people are at the moment, and they're accepting nobody. And the report on the BBC said today that they're actively stopping those people going to those countries. Those are the people that need to take the responsibility. We didn't start the conflict in Syria. The Arab Spring kicked this off. It's the people in the Arab world that needs to take responsibility for those people. But yet again, it's us that have to feel bad about it.
But if they don't,
I'm sorry. I'm tired of feeling sorry for those people. Those people in those countries need to take responsibility, not us.
But if those people don't take responsibility, if it's very clear that they don't and they never will, then do we still... Can our conscience be clear that we then don't do anything?
So, but then how do you decide...
Isn't it a bit... let me give you a scenario. Isn't it a bit like an old lady falls down in the street and you watch person after person after person just walking over her and walking past and not helping her? Does that mean that you, as a human being, can also just walk past and hold your head up high and say, well, no one else helped her, so I'm not going to either?
So using that same analogy, if that lady falls over in the street and we all walk past her, but we then turned around and we accepted somebody from another country while she's still lying there, which is exactly what's happening at the moment, how does that work out? How does that make us any better people, that we value somebody from another country's life more than we value people in our own country that are suffering?
Is that how you feel it is? Do you feel that people from abroad are valued more than British people?
Well, if we've got no money to look after the people that we already have, why would we take on more people? If we can't afford to keep that person that was in Milton Keynes out of a bin shed, and Ian was giving the woman from the housing committee a hard time because she's not going to have any houses for people until 2018, if we can't look after those people properly, how can we expect to look after more people from another country properly?
Mark, thank you very much for your call. Very interesting. Douglas in Barton. Hello, Douglas.
Hi. Just a point on the last one. The Arabs should take more, but you see, some are Sunni, some are Shiite. They won't take them, but us as Christian countries, mainly within Europe, you've got to admit, we're expected to take them. So I agree with what he said there. They really do need to do that. What I said before, I think a few weeks ago, was it's sorted at source, definitely. And the thing is, are we still going to send this 15 billion abroad to help if we're going to have them here and the work we're doing out there already? Because that isn't getting to the people, obviously. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have ISIS being so heavily armed, would we? You know, the small child dying, that's awful. But that's silly to think that we don't know that. Small children have been dying all the time, in hundreds, with these boats that have been turning over. So we know that. We're not stupid, the English public, you know. And the thing is, as I said before, we don't know who we're taking in. Somebody did mention about criminals. We don't know that. That is a possibility because we've got a lot here. I believe there's about 900 rapists and criminals of various degrees that are at large in this country now, but because of the human rights, cannot go back. So we've got to look at all these things.
Okay.
But, you know, that's what I feel anyway.
Douglas, and I thank you for sharing how you feel.